Hello and welcome to another edition of the recycling podcast, Recycle, Don't Be a Waster. This is probably our first proper episode where we'll actually cover a topic after last week's initial pilot episode, just really for us to dip our toes in the pool of recycling and all things waste related. The topic we're going to cover today is about that very interesting British Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, who tends to make quite outlandish and media attention-seeking statements. And last week at the environmental conference in Scotland, he stated that recycling doesn't work for plastic and that plastic recycling won't save our oceans and save the Pacific and all that sort of stuff. This created a lot of attention. A lot of people criticised him and said it was yet another gaffe by Boris Johnson, who, let's be honest, tends to make a lot of gaffes, whether intentional or unintentional. But I suppose we're going to look at that question today. I suppose the first thing we need to point out is the context is always important, and he actually made this statement to a group of school kids. So we should take that into account, obviously, when really looking at it. But I think it still is a very valid question. You know, in the waste industry, and Waster, where I work, is a waste company, waste and recycling business, there are significant issues with recycling plastic. Recycling is a wonderful thing, but it works significantly better for some materials than for others. Let's be honest. And I suppose when you look at it's not a uniform process by any means, and every material is different. Some materials are completely suited to recycling, reforming, reusing, and reprocessing, and others are much less capable in that regard. As an example, I'll say, we take metal. Most metals can be recycled very effectively. You know, in the extreme example of a gold necklace. Gold can be generally bought in most shopping centres. There might be a shop saying, "We buy gold," etc. Because the recyclability of the product is so easy. Aluminium is very similar, and it goes on and on. Cardboard is a manufactured product that is also extremely easy to recycle, and there's an active market for it. But when we have to be honest with ourselves that when we get to the world of plastic, and of course there are many different types of plastic, the situation changes greatly. And this is obviously also considering whether the plastic that is produced actually will get recycled or can be recycled. But I suppose the first thing we'd have to cover is, as we produce plastic, recycling is nice to have, but it will not prevent the issues that plastic creates in the environment. You know, plastic, theoretically, most of it will last forever in one form or another. So every plastic item that's been created to date from roughly the middle of the last century or the early, say the 1930s onwards, probably still exists in one form or another unless it has been recycled or burned, etc. But this plastic, and the big issue with it, its real pluses such as durability, non-toxic to when wrapping food, etc., are some of its biggest negatives when it's disposed of. Lots of it ends up in landfill where it lives forever, or in a much worse scenario, in our waterways, in the sea, in the oceans, where we have horrific situations such as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which basically is the conglomeration of, via trade winds, whereby huge amounts of plastic dumped, willy-nilly into the ocean or waterways collects in one place. And this plastic will last, let's be honest, nobody actually knows how long it will last. But we have to assume between 1,000 years and forever. Some of it will break down into what's called microplastics or smaller fragments of plastic, but that's not a good thing. It's probably even worse, whereby it gets into our food chains, it is consumed by animals, by fish, by sea life, and then it enters the entire food chain of nearly every animal on the planet. There was articles today about how even in rooms in the average house, people breathe in significant amounts of microplastic, and the reality is we actually don't know what this will do to people or animals or the environment over a long period of time. So the issue with that is, that's the significant issue with plastic. Even in a perfect world whereby perfect recycling was available, we would still face significant issues. we would still actually need to recycle it. For something to be recycled, we need to have A, the ability to recycle, i.e. the technology needs to exist. B, we need to have a separation system so that we can separate that plastic from other materials. C, we need to actually have a collection system, whether trucks or whatever it is, some method of collecting that separated plastic. And D, we need to have some facility where we're implementing that technology. And E, we need to have something or somebody that will pay for it, whether that's the government, whether it's corporations through an extended product responsibility system, which we'll cover in future podcasts. But let's be honest, for all of those 5 things to happen, and for them to happen perfectly, it's almost like we're dreaming to a large extent. We are wishing. And if we look at any one of them, the problems are manifold and they're quite obvious. So we look at the first one, does the technology exist? Yes, you can recycle many types of plastic, but not indefinitely, not over and over again. I think as a rule of thumb, we'll say plastic cannot be recycled more than 10 times. And each time you recycle it, the polymers, I'm generalizing here for simplicity, but as you recycle it, the polymers in the plastic weaken, and you need to add more and more what's called virgin plastic or new plastic into the mix to strengthen it up to be a viable product. You also will tend to see, as the plastic quality weakens, it tends to be used for lower and lower quality products. So the first time it's recycled, it could be used for a commercial purpose. But after the 5th or 6th time, you're really talking about stuff that's very low quality, generally is given away, and it's stuff such as the flooring in parks, park for kids if they fall and hurt their knee, so it's a soft floor. You have insulation for ceilings. You have plastic park benches in parks. These sort of low quality materials that generally are run as a charity or given away. There isn't really a commercial market for them, and when you get into the scenario of a lack of a commercial market, that's a significant issue, because somebody has to pay for it, and that somebody, whether it's not you or somebody else, but the money has to come from somewhere, whether through taxation, whether through fines and penalties on polluters or whatever it is. But as we have significant issues in the ability to recycle plastic, some of it, once it gets low grade, cannot be recycled, so it's not a perfect scenario. But then you look at the other 4 issues that we discussed. The separation of plastic, let's be honest, it's not really that possible. You don't, even in residential, no matter how ambitious you are as regards recycling and committed, there are significant difficulties in separating recycling items. A lot of products have multiple streams in the same product. Like, think of a toy or any modern gadget. You could have 3 different types of plastic. You may have some glass. You may have other items in it. And it just becomes impossible to separate. Even items such as, Pringles boxes or these sort of things. And so a very large percentage of that plastic will fundamentally end up just in general waste, and that will end up in landfill in nearly all situations. That's the separation aspect. Then you have a collection system. Somebody has to provide a viable collection process through trucks, through the infrastructure to actually do that. And again, we get into the serious issue as to who is going to pay for that. Is it through increased taxation? Is it through, again, major corporations, the producers, people like Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, etc.? Should they pay through these longer-term product stewardship projects? And at the moment, that isn't really it's not really happening. The facilities tend not to be, for example, in New South Wales and most other states, Victoria also, we pay landfill levies whereby it's quite significant funds for money going to landfill, and that money is supposed to be used to build increased recycling facilities, invest in alternative solutions, etc. But let's be honest, most councils and municipal organisations, when they do tenders for recycling projects or for municipal collections of recycling, price tends to be a big driver in that. And we have commingled recycling, but it's by no means a perfect system. And commingled recycling in most Australian and other areas tends to be limited to plastic bottles, drinks containers, those sort of items. Soft plastics, single-use plastics, items like that tend not to be recycled. Certainly not through a curbside collection. I don't actually have the figures in front of me as to what percentage of plastic is recycled in Australia, but I'm going to guess it's less than 50% of a total number. The other 50%, the best case scenario is that it ends up in landfill, where at least it doesn't pollute water, wildlife, that sort of aspect. But I suppose we get to the point of what Boris Johnson's saying, and it's, the old medical situation, prevention is better than cure. Even if recycling was perfect, which it's not, it would be a cure. But prevention is significantly better. We use, as a society, huge amounts of single-use plastics in aspects that are just completely valueless in many regards and useless. Some items, of course, are useful. Even a drinking straw provides, utility to the person drinking it. And I've read many studies that, people who have physical difficulties, physical disabilities, they value plastic drinking straws and items like that. And of course, there's a need for that. I would say, however, that many of these single-use items, single-use plastic, spoons, when you go to a sushi shop, the little piece of plastic grass inside the sushi container, some of them are completely ridiculous and provide no utility, but also provide no sustainability or longer term thinking as to who will get rid of that stuff, how can it be recycled, who can pay for it, etc. And it's very difficult for companies or anybody to process that material and to get rid of it. So in many regards, Boris Johnson is correct. In an ideal world, we would reduce the usage of plastic. Obviously this is for a future podcast, but we would be looking at something such as we'd look at items such as alternatives to plastic. We'd look at potentially plastic replacements such as sugarcane or items like that can be broken down. Obviously, that's a much longer discussion, which we'll cover on a future podcast. But, I think it's worth saying today, a lot of people jump at mocking Boris Johnson. I think he almost welcomes that. He's with his blonde hair and his affable poshness and these sort of things, which is his major selling point to the British populace. I think he has a point, and his point is we've gone down a long road of pretending that recycling will save the world. Let's be honest, it's vital, it's very important, but it is not a 100% solution to the issues that plastic present. I'll be interested to hear any listeners' viewpoints on this topic. So yeah, reach out to us, comment below on whatever system you're listening, or email us, of course, at waster.com.au, and we'll be more than happy to continue the conversation. Okay, so have a great day and recycle. Don't be a waster.